Getting too much spam and want to be able to better protect your personal data? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, we are nearly there. We are nearly through Broketober. Just one more week of Red Bull and instant noodles so we can get back to living regular, well-adjusted human lives. Relatively speaking, at least. Personally, I just wrapped my Silent Hill 2 review this past week, and I'm not gonna lie, I was happy with that one. Sometimes you look at a script and you're like, you know what? This one's alright. If you haven't yet seen that one, I'll leave a link to it below the like button, as well as a link to the most recent episode of the Friends Per Second podcast, where we do a deep dive on why Metaphor Refantatio is goated, and I also chat with former PlayStation boss Sean Layden. Really interesting interview. More on that later though. For now, let's get to the news. Always nice to start with a bit of good news, and this week's Xbox Partner Webinar was full of it. It was a thrifty 25 minutes long, but it had its fair share of things to get excited about, like Chronos: The New Dawn, the next horror game from Silent Hill 2 remake developer Bloober Team. It was a cinematic reveal with a brief snippet of gameplay at the back end, but it looked intriguing enough. Bloober Team have said that they're, quote, done making shitty games, end quote, so they're obviously feeling pretty confident about this one. No release date yet, but it's out sometime next year. Blindfire is interesting. So the team who were working on Prison Architect 011, they left that franchise behind to go and do their own thing, and this is their own thing. It's a competitive team shooter where you're basically walking around in the dark with only muzzle flash to light the environments, meaning you need to shoot to see. I do worry about how strong their anti-cheat measures will be, because this one is ripe for some aimbot bullshit. If you'd like to give it a try, it's out now in early access. We got a new look at Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza, with this trailer focusing on the actual naval battles you will be doing. Take a look. Are you seeing this? A Yakuza spin-off game is delivering a more complete pirate fantasy than Ubisoft was able to deliver in their dedicated pirate game that they spent 11 years making. Look, you can board other ships and fight on them. They said it couldn't be done, and yet here we are. Honestly, this just looks fantastic. I am super into it. And best of all, RGG has moved the release date up by 1 week to February 21st. You know why? Quote, "We wanted you to be able to play the game that comes after it with peace of mind," end quote. That's right. RGG literally moved the release date up a week so we could finish it in time for Monster Hunter Wilds. God bless RGG, truly. Hey, one thing I'd recommend putting on your radar is this. Take a look. So this is Eternal Strands, and it comes from a bunch of industry veterans, including Mark Laidlaw, formerly of BioWare. It's a physics-driven adventure game where the combat sandbox is surprisingly deep owing to your ability to conjure geometry, explode stuff, and grapple around. I actually played this one at Gamescom, and I really enjoyed it. It was actually brought to my attention by Ben Starr, who had earlier played it, and he was like, this rules, and he wasn't wrong. A really interesting premise, well delivered, and I'm definitely keeping an eye on this one. It's headed to Game Pass, and it's arriving sometime early next year. Subnautica 2 has been revealed. We all knew it was coming since developer Unknown Worlds has been very open about that, but now we've seen it for ourselves, or at least we've seen a cutscene based on it. The 2 in the title is important, since Subnautica Below Zero was a sort of side tale rather than an actual sequel. As such, it didn't move the needle much in terms of visuals or mechanics, and in fact, I think it made some big steps back in terms of biome design and storytelling. I'm very excited to see what the developers might be shooting for in a full-blown sequel. Subnautica is, to this day, unmatched in the survival genre. No game since has managed to deliver such a compelling survival adventure, and if you haven't yet played it, please go and do so right now. It's some 10 years old, but I promise you it hasn't aged a day. Subnautica 2 will launch into early access sometime in 2025. Just briefly, Animal Well was shadow dropped onto Xbox during the showcase, so go grab that one if you haven't. A legitimate Game of the Year contender, and I'm not even close to joking. And finally, the 2 biggest announcements, for my money at least, were from Remedy. First up, they showed off a new trailer for their Lake House DLC, which is out today. It looks scary, it's directly connected to Control, it stars Agent Estevez, and it is the last piece of content we are ever going to get for Alan Wake 2. Bittersweet indeed. This next thing, we all knew it was coming, but we didn't know when it was coming. But here it is, take a look.
This place was always dangerous. And weird. Policy and procedure used to keep us in control. But now, we need a new approach.
This is FBC Firebreak, a project that Remedy has been teasing for quite some time. It's a first-person co-op shooter set in the oldest house, the Federal Bureau of Control's headquarters, that also happens to play host to all sorts of unwelcome paranormal phenomenon. Obviously, shit's going down and it's up to you and two buddies to sort it out. Think Left 4 Dead or Back 4 Blood, but set in the Control universe? What's not to love? To be honest, I think the tone is a little surprising. Control is very self-serious, and this is clearly having a lot more fun with the universe, complete with outfits and weaponry that are a hell of a lot more quirky than Jess's plain clothes and her magic sidearm. Still, I'm totally down for this. Remedy have found their stride this past console generation, and I'm excited to see them push into new genres while continuing to build out the Remedy-verse. There's no date for this one yet, but it is confirmed for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation sometime next year, and it will launch on both Xbox Game Pass and PS Plus, an indication that developers are starting to understand how risky it is to launch these sorts of premium multiplayer-focused games without a guaranteed install base to deliver player populations and momentum. So yeah, that was the Partner Showcase webinar thingy, and I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty good. I've seen plenty worse, but few better. And even with a lean 25-minute runtime, this did give us plenty of things to look forward to in 2025, so I say, good job, Xbox. Sticking with Xbox a little while longer, there's some interesting news to sift through among the wreckage of the cancelled Halo Battle Royale game mode. So this was definitely in development. Xbox never actually announced it, but it had a team of nearly 200 people working on it for at least 2 years. The work was outsourced to a studio called Certain Affinity. When Xbox cancelled the project, Certain Affinity was forced to cut staff without any of their work ever seeing the light of day. A real shame too, because at least one Certain Affinity developer was very bullish on the project. Mike Klopper worked at Certain Affinity, and he updated his LinkedIn profile with the following, quote, "I led a large team of designers working on a cancelled Battle Royale game mode for Halo. I believe this product would have been a game changer for the franchise. We loved playing it and working on it. It was a fantastic experience in spite of its cancellation," end quote. So that's a bummer, right? And yeah, to be honest, I can see Battle Royale really working for Halo. Hell, Master Chief and his buddies were dead dropping from orbit well before Fortnite had us all jumping out of the battle bus. Still, it was Microsoft's call, and it left Certain Affinity in a difficult position. What would be next for them? Well, this past week, they were acquired by Keywords, a global corporate support studio operation you probably haven't heard of before. Believe it or not, they've acquired nearly 70 game-making studios over the past decade. They are a massive outfit working behind the scenes to support various AAA and AA projects, and now they've added the 175 people working at Certain Affinity to their roster. No word yet on what they'll be working on, but hopefully they find a way to bring some version of that Battle Royale game to market. Seems a real shame to let all that work go to waste. Turning now to Sony news, the assimilation of Bungie into the broader PlayStation board continues apace. This week, Bungie announced that their creative studios team will move from Bungie to PlayStation's worldwide studios. So this team has a broad responsibility to oversee the artistic vision and branding of all Bungie games, which at this point includes Destiny, Destiny Rising, and the upcoming Marathon. This team now being part of PlayStation's central outfit really demonstrates how the power center is shifting away from Bungie's leadership team and towards Hermen Holst's. The justification for the move is that in addition to overseeing Bungie's projects, this team will oversee all live service projects in the PlayStation portfolio, and there's a lot of them, mind you, given how all-in Sony are on the whole live service chase. So far, with the exception of Helldivers, that's largely been a fool's errand, with the cancellation of multiple projects as well as the spectacular failure of Concord, the live service hero shooter that couldn't even last 2 weeks before being shut down. Actually, on that note, there's some news on that front too. Did you know that Concord is actually getting back-end updates on Steam? Reported by PC Gamer, Concord was getting a bunch of very minor back-end changes right up until last week, which begs the question, why? The game is not playable at all, so what's the point of making any changes to it unless you plan to relaunch it? Now, to be clear, this is definitely not any sort of proof that Sony planned to bring Concord back. Right now, there are people just at Firesprite kind of waiting around to learn what's next for them. It's likely that some of them have some residual work left over from the game's launch, and they're just kind of doing it because they got nothing else to do, maybe? Kind of like clearing out your Jira backlog. Sony have remained very tight-lipped on the future of Concord, but given the scale of their losses and the costs associated with redeploying it as a free-to-play title that's ready to compete in the fiercely competitive live service market, I remain very skeptical that Sony have any plans to bring this one back. The live service frenzy is something I asked former PlayStation boss Sean Layden about when I interviewed him as part of the most recent episode of the Friends Per Second podcast. Link below the like button for that one. I didn't ask him about Sony's live service strategy per se, or about the broader industry's chase of that live service dollar. Here's what he had to say in response.
If you're really a live service game player, you're not playing many of them because it's so consuming. I think once you have 6 big live service games out in the world, that pretty much floods the zone. And to come in laterally with, I've got my live service game over here, it's a tough proposition. because there's a transfer cost for people saying, I'm going to give up my life that I've been doing on this game over there and get this new thing over there and invest it all into that, because they can't incorporate that into their life if they're already filled up with 1 or 2 live service games they're playing. So I think it looks attractive, like a mirage on the horizon. But when you get there, it's super hard to break in. And I think we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months a number of big titles which just haven't made the leap, even though they tried.
Now again, he was not specifically referencing any Sony live service projects here, but given that Concord is literally the quickest and most high-profile live service collapse of all time, it would behoove Sony to listen to what this man has to say. I also asked him about what he thinks are Sony's strengths that they should be leaning into during this present very tumultuous time, and here's what he had to say.
But I think Sony, having been there in the PlayStation group for 23 years, I will just say the central ethos that we had as the platform holder is that the main purpose of the platform holder is not to steal market share from other games in the market, but is to grow the pie bigger. That's the obligation of the platform holder, is not to take opportunity away from the third parties on your platform, but to make a bigger pie, to make a bigger install base, to grow the ability for all your third party partners to be successful. And I think that remains the Sony focus.
A really interesting comment that I never really considered. The business model for consoles was very much centered on making great first-party releases that would sell consoles, but those releases were very often single-player experiences. Sure, Halo has always been focused on multiplayer and was one of the original live service prototypes, but by and large, platforms have been focused on more finite games. Now though, Sony and Xbox are all in on the live service chase. They want to have these big live service experiences that suck up dollars and hours, but that invariably leaves less dollars and hours for third-party offerings. With consoles becoming less a focus of the business model, this drift toward IP and live services makes sense, but it's a trend that Nintendo are proudly bucking, and they're doing just fine. There's no easy answers to any of this, of course, but Sean is one of the most experienced and one of the most successful video game executives that this industry has ever seen, so I do think his perspective carries more weight than most. It was a really fascinating chat with him, and like I said, if you'd like to see the full interview, I'll leave a link to that below the like button. One point that Sean often makes is that big publishers need to be willing to commit to smaller projects, just like Ubisoft recently did with the critically acclaimed Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Legitimately one of the best Metroidvanias money can buy, and for my money, the Metroidvania with the best 2D action combat, full stop. Fantastic showing from Ubisoft Montpellier. Cannot wait to see what that team works on next. Oh, what's that? There's reports that Ubisoft have disbanded that team and rejected the pitch for a sequel? Classic Ubisoft. This report comes from French journalist Gautos? We're going to go with Gautos, who claims to have multiple sources confirming that the team behind The Lost Crown has broken up and will now be assigned to other things. When they pitched the sequel, one of the reasons it was knocked back was because it might cannibalize the sales of the first game. What a thing to say. Can you imagine if Square said that to Hironobu Sakaguchi after the success of Final Fantasy 1? They'd be like, but you said it was final! Jokes aside, this totally fucking blows, and it very much reminds me of what happened to Immortal Phoenix Rising, which was a very simple but very solidly made open world adventure game that felt like a true labor of love, but the sequel was canned so that the team could be put to work making more Assassin's Creed games, because that's just what the world needs. 11 Assassin's Creed projects currently in development because 10 just wasn't enough. Incidentally, we reached out to Ubisoft for official confirmation on this, and we heard back from one Abdelhak El Guess, senior producer on The Lost Crown, alongside some broader comments celebrating the success of Lost Crown. Here's what they had to say, quote, "Most of the team members who worked on Prince of Persia Lost Crown have shifted to other projects that will benefit from their expertise. We know players have a love for this brand, and Ubisoft is excited to bring more Prince of Persia experiences in the future," end quote. So yeah, there's the confirmation that this team isn't working on a follow-up, and the implicit suggestion that the team is no longer together, since his response does say that team members have been assigned to other projects, plural. Very sad times indeed. A quick lightning round to finish off. Speaking of Assassin's Creed, the upcoming Japan-themed Shadows has just got a price cut, and it's not even out yet. Ubisoft usually wait a full 5.5 days before discounting their titles, but I guess they're skipping that part and going straight to the discount phase this time around. The details on this one is that because Ubisoft are no longer offering the season pass or paid early access, they're reducing the price of the deluxe edition from $279 to $229. So, you know, it's practically a bargain now. The God of War TV adaptation has hit the rocks and will be starting from scratch. Apparently, the showrunners and executive producers have all left the project after turning in multiple well-received scripts, so it's very unclear what's gone down there. The new showrunner will be Ronald D. Moore, who previously worked on the very successful Outlander as well as For All Mankind. At least the project is still going to be well led, but yeah, don't expect it anytime soon. Speaking of TV, sort of, remember how Netflix opened that big California-based AAA studio led by veterans from Bungie, Sony Santa Monica, and Blizzard? Well, that's over. Just 2 years after announcing its opening and its ambition to create a new AAA IP, Netflix has closed that studio. This was first reported by Stephen Totilo in his GameFile newsletter, who managed to confirm the news with Netflix. Netflix still have a number of smaller studios in operation, but this was by far their biggest and most ambitious, perhaps signaling that Netflix don't quite have the risk appetite needed for the dizzying price tags associated with AAA games. And finally, word on the street is that Nintendo are looking to enter the Minecraft space with their own spin on a building-based shared world thing. An actual playtest for this has already happened, though it is under embargo, but reports suggest that this is a game about building a massive planet by farming resources and using them to make stuff. From the sounds of it, it's kind of like Animal Crossing if it were an MMO, and honestly, with Nintendo's backing, I can't see how something like that could fail. No date for this one yet, as it isn't even announced yet, but it is coming, so expect to hear more about this one in the future, maybe after we get some official word on the Switch too. So besides all that Xbox stuff, what got announced or delayed this week? Well, we all knew it was coming, but now it's official. The PC version of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is on the way, and in record time, only 15 months after initially releasing on the PS5. It'll arrive on the 30th of January next year and package up all the post-launch content released for it, but to justify selling a deluxe edition, they've also added 10 new suits. I guess they really got to make up for that reported development budget of $300 million. Nixxes will be handling the port for this, so things will most likely be peachy, although it will come with the now typical mandatory PSN requirement, something to keep in mind depending on where in the world you're located. That's not the only Spider-related game announcement this week. Remember Fullbright, the studio behind genre-defining emotional narrative games like Gone Home, Tacoma, as well as the recently released Open Roads? They shadow dropped their next game, and it's called Toilet Spiders. It's a replayable first-person survival horror game that involves you managing resources and assessing your ongoing risk of life while opening toilets. Some have items, some have radioactive spiders that kill you instantly. To be honest, I feel like this game should have been set in Australia since toilet spiders are basically pets down here. It's marked as an early access game, but apparently it's just the first entry in what will be an ongoing anthology of short, weird games from this team, a nice way for them to let loose. This one's out right now. It seems like Concord wasn't enough of a warning shot for 2K Games since they announced a new third-person multiplayer shooter called Project Ethos this past week. It's developed by Studio 31st Union, which is led by Michael Condrey, co-founder of Sledgehammer Games and one of the creators behind Call of Duty games like Modern Warfare 3, Advanced Warfare 2, and World War 2. Predictably, it looks like every other team shooter these days. A little Fortnite, a little bit of Overwatch, though its unique hook is that each hero will have semi-randomized roguelike style upgrades to choose from as the match goes on. That and it's free to play, which might hopefully give it more of a leg up than Concord had, but it's still got a lot of work to do if it wants to pull people away from the current roster of established multiplayer shooters and all the other ones vying for a slice of the pie. No release date for this one yet, though there was a short public playtest that occurred following the announcement. Two companies that'll never stop that live service chase are Marvel and NetEase, who on top of Marvel Rivals have now announced a new mobile game called Marvel Mystic Mayhem. It's a team-based tactical RPG, which is a little vague, but it seems to imply that it's one of those PvE RPGs like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, where you put together a squad of characters to mow through combat challenges. Could be wrong, of course, but we won't know more details until they give us a little more. And finally, Bohemia Interactive is possibly the first developer of note to give us a 2027 release window. That's the target for Arma 4, the next entry in their worryingly realistic military simulation series. They announced this one during a 25th anniversary concert in symphonic style. We don't have any more details beyond that. Breezing through a handful of release date announcements now, Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is looking like a very promising take on RPGs from French studio Sandfall Interactive, and they've just announced a release window of Q2 2025 alongside a bigger cast that includes the likes of Daredevil's Charlie Cox and the legendary Andy Serkis. Like, what the hell, man? I genuinely wonder how these guys got the budget for that. Temtem Swarm is the Vampire Survivors-like spin-off from the indie creature catching game, and it now has an early access release date of November 13th. A bit of hubbub when developer Crema first announced this one, given how much the community was still invested in the original game, but it is co-developed with GG Tech Studios, so no doubt Crema are working on something else too. Tetris Forever is the third entry in Digital Eclipse's interactive Goldmaster documentary series, and they've just announced that this one will be coming out on November 12th. These documentaries blend interviews, archival archival materials, playable prototypes, and actual video games to create an almost interactive museum-style experience, and they've been very well received. Tetris Forever comes with 13 versions of Tetris, many of them previously rare and hard to get variants, as well as a new 4-player mashup game called Tetris Time Warp put together by Digital Eclipse themselves. Ed is very much looking forward to this one. And finally, I guess we know why Sony was so keen to rush that Until Dawn remake out the door to a very mixed reception, and that's because the Until Dawn film adaptation is set to release on April 25th, 2025. This one is being directed by David Sandberg, who is most recently known for the Shazam movies, but was previously known for his low-budget horror films as well, so hopefully he can do the original game justice, where both the remake and Shazam 2 failed. Just one delay this week, and it's for 33 Immortals, which got pushed out of 2024 and into 2025. You may have seen this one in a couple of Xbox showcases. It comes from Thunder Lotus, the indie team that made the exceptional platforming / management game Spiritfarer, but this game is wildly different. It's a co-op isometric action roguelike for 33 players, if you can believe that. Thunder Lotus says it needs a bit more time in the oven, but says there'll be some kind of playtest on Epic or Xbox soon. And just one cancellation this week, and that's for Plants vs. Zombies 3, which is closing down for a, quote, major overhaul, end quote. Did you know that EA made a third Plants vs. Zombie game and it was free to play? Look, you're not alone in not knowing that. This one appeared in an alpha playtest back in 2019 and it was soft launched in various regions in 2020 mid-pandemic. From then it was overhauled and soft launched again multiple times all the way up to now. The only difference this time is that it's being taken down completely. Given some of the community responses we've seen, it's clear this free-to-play reinvention of one of the early mobile games hits was always trying to modernize it in the worst possible ways, but it's EA, so what do you expect? So what came out last week? Well, kicking things off is Super Mario Party Jamboree on Switch, which promised to be the biggest and best Mario Party ever. This one launched to a strong Open Critic score of 81, with an expected spread of extreme scores from people who love them some Mario Party, and also some people who absolutely don't. Games Hub gave this one 4.5 stars out of 5, saying, quote, Mario Party remains incredibly strong in this sequel, with timeless gameplay elevated by fresh new stages, each delightful in their own right, and a collection of mini-games that chart the strange, bizarre, and hilarious, not to mention that some of them are genuinely complex and challenging, end quote. Of the outlier reviews, however, one surprisingly came from noted Mario Party lover Dan Reichert, writing for GameSpot. He gave it a 6 out of 10, admitting that, quote, the new modes are largely duds, the tantalizing promise of 20-player online falls a bit flat, and several of the new minigames are a slog. But once you grab a few close friends and you're laughing with it over beers, the deeply flawed game turns into a raucous night of camaraderie and laughter. Jamboree is no more or less nonsense than any Mario Party, and it's one I'll still be playing a ton of despite its flaws, end quote. From Mario to MechWario. MechWarrior 5? Was that anything? I don't think that was anything. Anyway, MechWarrior 5 Clans has landed to a strong 81 on Open Critic, with critics applauding the excellent campaign even as they lament some of what made MechWarrior into the franchise that it is. PC Gamer scored this one an 82, saying, quote, Clans is a bold game that improves on the classic sim-light action of MechWarrior by adding a more modern, story-driven framing, which succeeds at the cost of flexibility. There's good variety from patrols and recon to straight-up brawls, but ultimately they're all quite linear. There's no random procedural mission and almost never a large field mission with different objectives to conquer at your own pace or in any order you choose, end quote. Paste gave it 7.5 out of 10, thinking that it should have gone a little harder into the new vibe, saying, quote, I wish they'd honestly leaned more into the strengths of this game, the absurd vibe of Battletech, because when Clans actually does that, Piranha reminds me exactly of why Battletech is so fucking cool, end quote. Getting to the spooky stuff now, and Fear the Spotlight is the debut game released from Blumhouse, the indie horror film outfit that wants to bring its rapid and experimental approach to game making, and it seems to have gone pretty well. This one follows two girls trapped in a school after dark with a retro PS1 vibe, and it launched to a very respectable 81 on Open Critic. Checkpoint Gaming gave it a 9 out of 10, saying, quote, I get split hairs for this game's small issues, but instead it's worth focusing on the well-paced and perfectly length experience that it is. Fear the Spotlight is an excellently moody horror adventure with tactile puzzle solving and adorable, highly likable characters, end quote. Nintendo Life thought much the same thing, saying, quote, it's a game loaded with atmosphere and dread throughout, with immersive tactile puzzles and an overarching storyline that is engaging and tragic in equal measure, end quote. And finally, Batman Arkham Shadows reviews are just starting to trickle in as I finalize this script, and they are very impressive. If you find yourself surprised to hear there's a new Arkham game just releasing, then there's probably a good reason for that. It's a VR exclusive. In fact, it's actually a Meta Quest exclusive, and the studio is actually owned by Meta, so it has almost zero chance of ever coming to Steam. A real shame too, because if the reviews are anything to go by, then this is one of the best VR experiences money can buy, and it's a damn fine Batman game to boot. No OpenCritic page for this one yet, but over on Metacritic it's sitting at a fantastic 87, making it one of the highest rated VR releases like ever. Silicon Era scored this one an 80, saying, quote, "While it may not have the impressive mechanics to be a great VR introduction, Batman Arkham Shadow is fun to play and faithful to its Arkham predecessors, and yeah, picking off enemies one by one feels great," end quote. Upload VR loved it even more, scoring it a 90 and saying, quote, "Arkham Shadow feels faithful to the flat-screen Arkham games while innovating in its own way through VR-specific design. Combat remains familiar yet incredibly satisfying, detective mode feels like a natural fit for first-person gameplay, and the strong narrative held my interest throughout," end quote. Like I said, I actually played this one back at Gamescom and I really enjoyed it, so these reviews do not come as a surprise. Fantastic to see someone sticking with the Arkhamverse while Rocksteady do whatever it is they're doing right now. So what's coming out next week? Well, first up is the indie platform fighting game sequel Rivals of Aether 2 on October 23rd. The original one of these was very well received and sits at an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam with over 30,000 reviews, so there's definitely a community of people eagerly awaiting this one. It's got a new 3D art style, and though it'll be a premium product, the developers have said that all future characters added to the game will be free, something that the big publishers simply cannot bring themselves to do. PC only for this one right now. Joining Rivals of Aether on the 23rd is Wilmot Works It Out for PC and Mac. This one comes from Hohokum designer Richard Hogg and his team at Hollow Ponds, who literally just released Flock with Annapurna. This one's a charming little game that's all about doing jigsaw puzzles and also about arranging and managing chaos in an orderly way. You get a bunch of puzzles in the mail, although some of the pieces have been mixed up and you need to try and organize them and solve them in a timely manner as more puzzle packages come in. It's a follow-up to Wilmot's Warehouse from a few years back, which had a very similar management vibe. A new Square Enix RPG arrives on the 24th of October. It's Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven, which arrives for PC, Switch, PS5, and PS5. No Xbox for this one. What happened to that multi-platform strategy, question mark? The original version of this one came out in 1993 for the Super Famicom, and while the Saga series hasn't been Square's most popular, it's always taken massive swings. There's no XP, for example, and your characters grow depending on how often they use their skills in battle, and the whole thing is a non-linear adventure which unfolds over several generations of royalty. And speaking of royalty, Slay the Princess, the Pristine comes out on all platforms on the 24th. This is the expanded version of a looping narrative game that only came out on PC last year and had quite a bit of buzz around it. It got nominated for a bunch of awards and is overwhelmingly positive on Steam. Looks like a pretty simple visual novel, but I'm told there are a bunch of unexpected twists and turns in the story and game structure, so that's nice. It's also a free update if you already own the base game, by the way. Absolutely huge day for furries and for people who really don't like furries, because on the 26th, both Sonic X Shadow Generation and Call of Duty Black Ops 6 arrive. Sonic X Shadow's Generation contains both a remastered version of Sonic Generations, which has both 2D and 3D stages from across Sonic history, as well as a new campaign starring Shadow and featuring stages from his history. It'll also have Keanu Reeves as Shadow in a DLC pack later on down the line, just before the new movie comes out. A lot of hype for this one, actually. I was at Tokyo Game Show, and it is no exaggeration to say that some of the longest lines I saw were to play this game. Not gonna lie, it does look like a pretty good time. As for COD, the latest entry will feature another over-the-top alternate history Black Ops campaign, which I actually really enjoy. They're my favorite COD campaigns, actually. Would I pay 70 big ones for what I imagine will be a 6-hour campaign full of car chases and turret sequences? No, but I won't have to, because for the first time this year, a brand new Call of Duty is arriving day one on Game Pass, but only Game Pass Ultimate, or Game Pass PC. That's an okay deal for console owners, but it's a bit of a steal for the PC master race, who pay significantly less for Game Pass while getting the same library of games. Yet another reason why everyone needs to make the jump to PC, just putting that out there. Anyway, Black Ops 6 will also feature the multiplayer and zombie stuff that the community love to complain about, despite sinking thousands of hours into it, and I can say that because I'm a Destiny fan. I do think this year's COD is looking pretty good, actually. I'm optimistic, but we'll all find out together when this launches on the 26th. Moving on to next week, Tuesday the 29th will give us Clock Tower Remind, the remaster of Capcom's legitimately terrifying horror game from the Super Nintendo days. If you haven't played this one, it's kind of like a point-and-click adventure game where you have no way to defend yourself against a guy with a pair of scissors, so it's all about running and hiding. The remaster is being handled by WayForward, and it'll feature a bunch of quality-of-life changes alongside the original version that's coming out on every platform. Sulphur is a game we very much enjoyed the demo of at Steam Next Fest a while back, and it's launching into early access on Tuesday as well. This is an indie FPS meets old-school dungeon crawler where you have to procure and modify guns and make the most of what you can as you dive deeper and deeper. Life is Strange Double Exposure comes out on Tuesday for PC, PS5, and Xbox. Now, this new entry is being handled by Deck 9, who took over from creators Don't Nod, and it's trying to do some new things with gameplay elements that the series has not seen before. The first couple of episodes of this one actually came out a couple of weeks back, but only for super keen Deluxe Edition owners. And yeah, the response was like not good at all. People really did not like this. Like from a gameplay sense, it was whatever, but the story stuff, people were really not happy with what they were doing with one of the main characters. Be sure to wear your hazmat suit if you step into the subreddit, because it is very messy in there right now. And finally, get those spurs on, because Red Dead Redemption will finally launch on PC on Tuesday. It'll feature the Undead Nightmare expansion, as well as the typical PC graphical options, but most importantly, it'll let modders turn John Marston into Shrek and also his horse into Thomas the Tank Engine or something. Personally, I'm just looking forward to the donkey video, not gonna lie. Alrighty, promise you've never seen anything quite like this, so put this on your radar. This is Ascending Inferno, a challenging precision platformer about being a dead soccer player and having to... This is Ascending Inferno, a challenging precision platformer about being a dead soccer player and having to dribble and kick a soccer ball upwards through the layers of hell for a chance at redemption, kind of like Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It with a twist. The twist being that the soccer ball is the soul of your dead brother. It's made by a small Aussie indie team of 4 people, and aside from the rage-inducing but moorish gameplay, it's also got a really cool vision of hell as this gothic neon cyberscape. Also, the soccer thing is weird, but I'm definitely into it. It's coming out on October 28th, and it looks like it's come a long way since we first saw its reveal. It's also got a free demo on Steam, just in case you aren't sure whether or not you can handle its particular brand of failure. If you're at all interested, pop over to our Steam Curator page, which has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and on the Epic Games Store, you can still grab Invincible Presents Adam Eve and the Australian card shop management game Cardboard Kings until October 25th, but come this Friday, they'll be replaced by another great Australian game, Moving Out. Now, if you haven't played this one, imagine like the co-op chaos of Overcooked, only it's about moving furniture and trying not to destroy everything in the process. Definitely a good one with a couple of mates, and even though there's a sequel out right now, you can't argue with 3. Wave 2 of the new Xbox Game Pass titles for October is a good one, obviously. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 will be arriving on the service, but it's also joined by cloud versions of Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone. Later on in the month, we'll also be getting Ashen, the excellent debut from A44 Games, as well as Dead Island 2 on October 31st. Finally, just a heads up that StarCraft 1 and 2 are leading the charge for next month. They'll both hit November 5th. Prime Gaming's new freebies this week include a bunch more dark and spooky titles, some of the more notable ones including Through the Darkest of Times, a strategy management game that sees you as part of the European resistance during World War II, and there's also The Killing Floor 2, which also takes place in Europe, except you're fighting zombies. It's kind of different. Cleaning up alien slime is the focus of The Gunk, a nice little action game from a few years back that flew under the radar. And if you like Slay the Spire, you should definitely pick up Monster Train, which is also on offer. And finally, would you believe that Nintendo still has a classic Nintendo 64 game to release on Nintendo Switch Online? This week, Rare's beloved platforming sequel Banjo-Tooie is finally coming to the service. Maybe fans do care about Banjo-Kazooie after all. Just an FYI for no particular reason, Xbox. You're welcome. Our feel-good story for the week, it's just got to be this one. If you've already heard it, you knew it was coming, but if you haven't heard it, then trust me, you don't want to miss it. The man, the myth, the legend, the GOAT, Masahiro Sakurai, creator and steward of the Super Smash Bros. Series, after the final update for Ultimate some 3 years back, he actually started his own YouTube channel where every few weeks he would upload a new video on the topic of game making. He teased out some little esoteric detail that we as players would never actually notice or understand, and like revealing a magic trick, Sakurai would pull back the curtain on all the little tricks and flourishes that go into S-tier game making. A truly fantastic gem of a channel that's been running for 2.5 years now, and a lovely side project for Sakurai, given that he's not working on anything else right now, so devoting himself each week to a new YouTube video would have been a nice way to keep himself busy while he plans his next move. Or so we thought. In typical Sakurai fashion, his YouTube channel was yet another trick. Turns out he hasn't been recording this stuff on the reg. Turns out he recorded all of it 2.5 years ago, and after that he's just doled it out slowly, making us think that it was all freshly recorded content. And your man spared no expense, by the way. His YouTube channel was not monetized, but between recording, editing, and animations, Sakurai spent nearly $600,000 to make this channel a reality. Like, that's unbelievable. Though I must say, I think I could have delivered that much cheaper. So Sakurai, if you're looking for a business partner for round 2, give me a call. But wait, wait, there is more. To cap all of this off, Sakurai revealed that he has not been idle this past 2.5 years. In fact, he has been working on a new game this entire time. Your man is literally 3 years deep into the development of his next game when we all thought he was kicking back living that lazy YouTuber life. Never heard a story quite like this, and it's a reminder of what makes Sakurai so special. We're sad that the YouTube experiment is over, but pleased to know that the wait for his next game is roughly 3 years shorter than we would have otherwise expected. Alright ladies and gents, we are done here today. Hope you enjoyed yourself, and if you did, please, pretty please, with sugar and a cherry on top, don't forget to like the video, as that will carry the video far and wide to the choppy seas that are the YouTube algorithm. Some huge reviews coming before the end of the month, so you don't want to miss them. And if you're up for that, then be sure to subscribe and ding that notification bell. I'm off to play more Diablo now. The campaign sucked, but the rest of it ain't half bad. I'll give you the full rundown soon. For now though, thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, Incogni. So I'll admit, I didn't really know much about the world of personal data until I was approached by this video sponsor, Incogni. I knew that big corporations like Apple and Google had my data, but what I didn't know was that hundreds of other companies that I'd never even heard of also have my data, because it had been on-sold by various data brokers. These companies can sell your data to basically whoever they want, including spammers, or worse, malicious actors looking to use your personal data to commit identity theft. Now the loophole here is that you can actually technically contact these companies and ask them to delete your data, but not only do you not know who has your data, but there are so many of these data brokers that it would be impossible for you to contact them all. That's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your details, you grant it the required permissions, and after that, Incogni does all the work for you, setting out hundreds of automated requests to reclaim your data. Take me for example. Incogni has cleared my data from over 66 places that I didn't even know had my data, and had I done all of that back and forth myself, that would have taken me around like 50 hours, which is time that none of us have. I've absolutely noticed a significant reduction in the amount of spam emails and texts that I've been getting, and it just feels nice to know that my data is more secure, since no one wants their personal information being held by some company that you didn't even know existed. It's super easy, super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.